Drove home from deployment to find 15 HOA mansions on my land. Now they all pay rent to me. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional, and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. Sir, turn your truck around before I have it towed. Those were the first words anyone said to me after 14 months overseas, standing 10 feet inside the gate of land my grandfather had owned since 1968. Rain ticked against the windshield of my Ford F-250, soft at first, then hard enough to blur the stone pillars rising on both sides of the road. Silver Pines Reserve, the brass sign read. Private residential community. My GPS insisted I had arrived home. Everything outside my window said I had taken a wrong turn. I lowered the glass and smelled wet pavement, fresh mulch, and the sharp chemical bite of new asphalt. The security guard kept one hand on his radio. Behind him, 15 mansions glowed against the storm, each one 3 stories tall, with wide porches, polished windows, and landscaping so new the trees still wore nursery tags. 14 months earlier, this road had been gravel. There had been a rusted cattle gate, a sagging mailbox, and an old oak tree leaning toward my grandfather's cabin. Now decorative lamps lined the shoulder every 20 feet. Sprinklers hissed across lawns that should have been open pasture. This is Mercer property, I said. The guard gave me the tired smile people use when they think they are being patient with someone confused. No, sir. This is Silver Pines. Residents and registered guests only. I looked past him toward the largest house, built exactly where the cabin had stood. Music drifted through its open doors. People in clean shirts and summer dresses gathered beneath a covered patio, raising glasses while lightning flickered over the roofline. An HOA banner hung between 2 white columns. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, but I kept my voice level. Who authorized construction here? His radio crackled before he could answer. A woman's voice said, I'll handle it. She appeared a minute later in a pearl-white Range Rover, rolling to a stop beside my truck without touching the brakes until the last second. Vanessa Whitmore stepped out holding a black umbrella. Blonde hair, cream-colored suit, silver heels that sank slightly into the wet grass. She looked at my dusty uniform, then at my truck, as though both had lowered the property values by simply existing. You need to leave, she said. This is private land. Before I answered, a boy ran past us carrying something rusty in both hands. He had probably found it near a flower bed. I recognized the bent iron curve immediately. My grandfather's horseshoe. It had hung above the cabin door for 32 years. I opened my door and stepped into the rain. Water ran from the edge of my cap and down the back of my neck. Vanessa's smile tightened. Somewhere beneath the clubhouse, a pump kicked on with a low mechanical hum. I knew that sound too. It was our well. Then my boot struck something hidden beside the pavement. I looked down and wiped mud from the top of a steel survey pin stamped M17. My grandfather's boundary marker. The asphalt ended 2 inches beyond it. I raised my eyes toward the 15 mansions, the clubhouse, and the woman telling me I was trespassing. That was when I understood the mistake they had made. They had built an entire neighborhood while I was deployed. They had sold the houses, collected the fees, and thrown a party on my land. But they had never moved the boundary. Vanessa kept talking, but I barely heard her. My attention stayed on that survey pin, half buried in mud beside the pavement. I had watched my grandfather drive it into the ground when I was 12 years old. He had handed me the sledgehammer afterward and told me boundaries only mattered if somebody remembered where they were. 14 months earlier, before I left for Kuwait, the property looked exactly the way it had through most of my childhood. 62 acres of pasture, cedar, and stubborn Texas soil sat 3 miles outside Cedar Ridge. The cabin stood near the northern fence, painted a faded green that peeled every summer no matter how often we repaired it. Behind the cabin was a red barn with one crooked door and a brass lock my grandfather had bought in 1979. I kept the key on the same ring as my military identification tags. The land had belonged to Samuel Mercer since 1968. He bought it after 27 years repairing farm equipment and saving every extra dollar in a coffee can beneath his kitchen sink. He never called it an investment. He called it proof that a working man could leave something solid behind. My father grew up there. So did my sister Rachel and I. When my father passed away, the deed transferred to me exactly as my grandfather had written it. No partners, no development rights, no homeowners association. 3 weeks before my deployment, Mark Dalton from Dalton Ridge Properties came to the cabin wearing polished boots that had never touched real work. He offered me $2,100,000 for the entire tract. He spread glossy drawings across my grandfather's kitchen table, showing curved streets, fountains, and luxury homes where the pasture stood. I told him the land was not for sale. He smiled as if I had misunderstood the size of the number. I folded his drawings, handed them back, and walked him to the gate. Before I left the country, I did everything by the book. Property taxes went on automatic payment. Rachel agreed to collect certified mail and check the cabin twice each month. I locked the barn, photographed every boundary marker, and installed 4 trail cameras along the southern fence. For the first 6 weeks, Rachel sent pictures. Dust on the porch, deer near the well, the same oak branches scraping the roof. Then the cameras stopped transmitting one by one. I blamed weak batteries and desert heat interfering with my patience. Rachel said the mailbox was usually empty. 2 envelopes arrived from the county, but both listed her name as Rachel Mercer and used an address she had left 4 years earlier. She returned them unopened because they were not properly addressed. That detail felt small at the time. Standing in the rain beside 15 mansions, it felt sharpened. I pulled out my phone and opened the tax account. Every payment showed cleared. Every acre still carried my parcel number. Vanessa glanced at the screen and gave a quiet laugh. She said county systems were slow and ownership had already been resolved. I asked when. Her answer came too quickly. 9 months ago. 9 months ago, I had been standing inside a military operations center nearly 7,000 miles away. According to Vanessa, I had also been signing development approvals in Texas. That was when the rain no longer felt cold. It felt clean. Because lies can look impressive from a distance, especially when they come with stone gates and million-dollar roofs. But a lie still has to survive the dates. Officer Ruiz waited until I reached the county road before turning off his lights. Vanessa remained beneath the stone entrance, one hand resting on the gate controls, watching my taillights disappear through the rain. I drove 3 miles before pulling into an empty gas station lot. The storm had thinned to a cold drizzle. Water slid down the windshield while I called the only land attorney whose name I trusted. Daniel Brooks answered on the 4th ring. He had represented my father in a boundary dispute 20 years earlier and still spoke with the same dry patience that made every sentence sound heavier than it was. I sent him photographs of the survey pin, the tax account, and the electronic approval carrying my name. He called back 12 minutes later. "Ethan, do not go home," he said. "Go to the county records office when it opens." His voice had changed. The patience was gone. By 8 the next morning, I was standing beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. The records office smelled of old paper, dust, and burnt coffee. Daniel arrived carrying a leather briefcase polished smooth at the corners. He found the filing in less than an hour. A curative title action had been submitted by Dalton Ridge Properties, claiming the original owner had abandoned active possession and approved subdivision development through a digital transfer. The final review was scheduled for Friday at 4 o'clock. It was Tuesday morning, 72 hours. Once the county certified the correction, reversing it would not become impossible, but it would become slower, more expensive, and buried beneath 15 mortgages, multiple insurance policies, and a wall of lawyers paid by people with much deeper pockets than mine. Daniel tapped the page with one finger. "This is not random," he said. "Someone waited until you were out of the country, redirected the notices, and created a deadline you were never supposed to see." The paper felt warm from the printer. My name sat at the bottom again, neat and false. By noon, we filed an emergency objection, but the clerk warned us the submission lacked supporting evidence. A claim was not enough. We needed proof that the development had used my property without valid authority. That evening, I parked half a mile from Silver Pines and walked the old fence line through wet cedar and knee-high grass. The air smelled of damp earth and limestone. I carried the brass barn key in my pocket, although there was no barn left to open. The The southern fence had been replaced with decorative stone, but the terrain had not changed. I knew every rise in that land, every drainage cut, every place the soil softened after rain. Near the clubhouse, I heard the pump before I saw the utility shed. A low mechanical thrum traveled through the ground and into the soles of my boots. The sound was steady, deep, familiar. My grandfather's well pump had made that same vibration every summer morning when we watered cattle. I crouched behind a row of new boxwoods and watched a 6-inch pipe run from the shed toward the 15 homes. A metal plate on the concrete base still carried the original manufacturer number. I had written that number on a maintenance invoice before deployment. The HOA had not drilled a new well. They had connected the entire neighborhood to mine. Then the clubhouse lights came on. Through the window, I saw Vanessa and Mark Dalton standing over a table covered with folders. Mark pointed toward a map, while Vanessa shook her head. I could not hear the words, but I saw the label on the top page when she lifted it toward the glass. Mercer Well Access. That was the first clean mistake they had made. Houses could be argued over. Maps could be altered. Signatures could be forged. But water usage left meters, permits, invoices, and dates. I raised my phone and began recording. The red timer appeared on the screen. 71 hours remained, and for the first time since I came home, the clock was no longer working only for them. By sunrise, Daniel had already traced the well permits back to my grandfather's original filing. The records showed one private agricultural well, one owner, and no authorization for residential service. Silver Pines had been pulling thousands of gallons each week through equipment registered to me. That alone would have been enough to slow the title correction, but Daniel kept digging. At 10:30, he found the company that had installed the new water lines. The invoice listed Dalton Ridge Development Services as the customer, not the Homeowners Association. The mailing address belonged to a vacant office suite outside Austin. The company name appeared on 6 other filings connected to Mark Dalton. Shell companies leave patterns when the people behind them get lazy. Same address, same registered agent, same insurance carrier. By noon, Daniel had mapped 4 of them across his conference table. Mark had created layers between the land purchase, the construction contracts, and the home sales. Vanessa had been the public face, but Mark had built the machine. I called Rachel and asked her to search every email she had received while I was overseas. An hour later, she found one message that made my stomach tighten. It came from an address almost identical to mine, except one letter had been replaced. The message approved a preliminary survey and instructed all future notices to go through Dalton Ridge. The timestamp placed it at 2:17 in the morning Texas time. At that exact moment, I had been signed into a secure military network in Kuwait. Daniel leaned back in his chair when he saw it. "That is not just a bad filing," he said. "That is deliberate impersonation." The room smelled of coffee and warm printer ink. Outside, traffic moved along Main Street as if nothing had changed. Inside, 15 mortgages had just become evidence. Then Daniel showed me the part that made the whole situation heavier. Every family in Silver Pines had purchased a completed home through a title company that relied on Mark's false chain of ownership. Teachers, retirees, a firefighter and his wife, a couple with twin daughters. They had paid down payments, signed 30-year loans, and believed the polished documents in front of them. If I demanded immediate removal, the houses could become trapped in litigation for years. The residents might lose everything even though they had never known the land was stolen. Vanessa and Mark had built their profit on that exact pressure. They assumed no owner would risk looking cruel enough to displace 15 families. That afternoon, I received a call from a woman named Claire Bennett. She lived in the 4th house past the gate. Her voice was cautious. She said she had watched the police remove me and then checked her closing documents. The legal description of her property did not match the map attached to her mortgage. 2 different parcel numbers appeared on 2 different pages. She had asked Vanessa about it that morning. Vanessa told her to stop spreading panic. Claire lowered her voice before saying the next part. "There is one house here nobody owns. House 15, the clubhouse, had never been sold. Dalton Ridge still held it through one of Mark's shell companies. That building contained the association office, the financial records, and the pump controls for my well. It was not an amenity. It was the center of the entire operation." I looked at the clock on Daniel's wall. 54 hours remained. Mark and Vanessa thought 15 occupied homes protected them. They had forgotten to hide the one building that connected everything. Claire met us at a diner 2 miles from Silver Pines just after dark. The place smelled like fried onions, coffee, and lemon cleaner. Rainwater still clung to the shoulders of her denim jacket. She carried a grocery bag filled with closing papers, association notices, and printed emails. Daniel spread everything across the table between the sugar dispenser and the napkin holder. The mistakes were small, but they lined up too neatly to be accidents. One document listed her lot as number 4. Another called it Parcel 12B. A third used my original acreage description but replaced my name with Dalton Ridge Development Services. Claire had asked questions during closing. Mark's staff told her the county was updating records. Vanessa told her minor discrepancies were common in new communities. Claire believed them because the lender approved the loan and the title company issued insurance. Most people trust a stack of stamped paper when 5 professionals tell them it is normal. Then she showed us an email from Vanessa marked confidential. It warned residents not to speak with me because I was attempting to exploit a clerical error for financial gain. Attached was a draft statement calling me unstable after overseas service. Daniel read it twice. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed flat. Keep the original file. Do not forward it. We need the metadata. Claire nodded and slid another page toward us. It was a clubhouse maintenance schedule. At the bottom, beneath landscaping and pool service, was a line for Mercer well pump inspection. My name was still there. They had copied it from the old equipment records and never noticed. The next morning, Daniel filed a subpoena request tied to the emergency title objection. Claire signed an affidavit. I submitted deployment logs showing my location when the false approval was sent. By afternoon, the county agreed to pause the Friday certification pending review. The clock stopped at 27 hours, but the pressure did not. We still needed proof that Vanessa knew the boundaries were wrong before construction began. That proof came from a man named Harold Pike. Harold had retired from the county building office 6 months earlier. He lived in a small brick house near the water tower and answered the door wearing suspenders and reading glasses. The air inside smelled of cedar shavings and old files. When Daniel mentioned Silver Pines, Harold did not look surprised. He walked to a metal cabinet and pulled out a red folder. Inside was a site inspection report dated 11 months earlier. Harold had marked 3 boundary pins, including M17, and written that construction should stop until ownership was confirmed. Attached was a photograph of Vanessa standing beside the same pin I had found at the gate. Another photograph showed Mark pointing at the survey map. Harold had emailed the warning to both of them. Vanessa replied that the pins were outdated agricultural markers and instructed the crew to continue. Mark approved the extra cost to remove them. I stared at the photograph until the room went quiet around me. Vanessa had not made a mistake. She had seen the boundary. She had stood beside it. Then she had ordered it buried. Harold handed me one more envelope. A construction worker had mailed him a memory card after quitting the project. On it was video of a crew pulling steel markers from the ground and tossing them into the landscaping pond. At the edge of the frame, Vanessa's white Range Rover sat with its custom plate visible. Silver Pines 15. The same plate I had seen at the gate. Daniel closed the folder slowly. We had the false email. We had the well records. We had the shell companies. Now we had intent. I thought about the boy carrying my grandfather's horseshoe through the rain. I thought about 15 families sleeping beneath roofs they believed were theirs. Then I looked at the video timer frozen on Vanessa's car. She had tried to erase every line my family left on that land. Instead, she had recorded herself crossing each one. Daniel wanted to file everything immediately, but I asked for one more night. Evidence could stop the title correction. It could also send Mark and Vanessa running before the residents understood what had been done to them. I needed them in the same room, on the record, with nowhere to hide behind polished language. Claire told me the association had scheduled an emergency meeting for Thursday evening at the clubhouse. Vanessa planned to calm homeowners and accuse me of trying to seize their property. I arrived 10 minutes early wearing clean jeans, work boots, and the same field jacket I had carried overseas. The clubhouse smelled of new carpet, citrus polish, and the faint mineral scent from my well pump beneath the floor. Folding chairs filled the main room. 14 families sat beneath a chandelier Mark had probably charged them twice for. Vanessa stood at the front beside a projector screen. Mark sat near the exit with a leather briefcase across his knees. When I entered, Every conversation stopped. Vanessa smiled as though she had invited me. "Mr. Mercer has decided to join us," she said. "Perhaps now he can explain why he wants 15 families removed from their homes." I did not answer her accusation. I placed a single folder on the table and faced the residents. "I am not asking anyone here to leave." The room shifted. A few people glanced at Vanessa. Mark's hand tightened around the briefcase. I told them the land had never been legally transferred. I told them their houses had been sold through a false chain of title. Then I offered terms simple enough for everyone to understand. Any resident who cooperated with the investigation could remain under a 30-year ground lease with a fixed rate, legal ownership protection, and no retroactive rent. Existing mortgage payments would continue while the title companies and lenders corrected their records. The current association would dissolve. The clubhouse and well system would transfer to the legal landowner. Vanessa laughed before I finished. "That is extortion," she said. Her voice bounced off the high ceiling. "You are using a paperwork error to take control of a community you did not build." It was not an error. I looked at Harold Pike, seated in the last row. He raised the red inspection folder where everyone could see it. Vanessa's smile thinned. I looked at Claire. She held up the confidential email warning residents not to speak with me. Mark stood and said the meeting was over. The side door opened before he reached it. 3 people entered wearing plain business suits. 1 represented the county fraud division. 1 worked for the title insurance carrier. The 3rd was an investigator from the district attorney's office. Daniel had invited them as property stakeholders after submitting the emergency evidence package that afternoon. Vanessa stared at them, then at me. The room became so quiet I could hear the well pumps cycling beneath our feet. Daniel connected his laptop to the projector. First came the forged email, then my deployment access logs, then Harold's photographs of Vanessa standing beside marker M17. Finally, the video showed workers removing the survey pins while her Range Rover waited nearby. Someone in the second row whispered, "She knew." Vanessa turned toward Mark. Mark looked at the floor. I slid my proposal across the table. "This is the last version that protects every innocent family in this room," I said. "Sign it, preserve the records, and cooperate." Vanessa pushed the folder back without opening it. She called the residents ungrateful. She said she had created value where there had only been weeds in an abandoned cabin. Then she ordered everyone to leave. Nobody moved. Claire stood first and placed her closing documents beside my proposal. One by one, other homeowners followed. 14 sets of papers formed a line across the table. Vanessa had built her power by making each family believe they stood alone. That night, she watched them choose the landowner she had tried to erase. The hearing began Monday morning in a courtroom that smelled of polished wood, old paper, and coffee carried in from the hallway. Rain pressed softly against the tall windows. Daniel placed 15 sets of keys on the table in front of us, 1 for each house and 1 for the clubhouse. The metal clicked against the wood in a line that made every attorney in the room look up. Vanessa arrived in a navy suit with 2 lawyers. Mark sat 3 seats away from her and never once met her eyes. Behind us, the homeowners filled 2 rows. Claire held her closing folder against her chest. The judge asked Daniel to explain why 15 completed homes were sitting on land with disputed ownership. Daniel did not begin with the houses. He began with my grandfather's deed. The original paper was yellowed at the edges and carried the county seal from 1968. Next came the tax records showing uninterrupted payment. Then my deployment logs, which proved I was inside a secured military facility in Kuwait when the development approval bearing my name was created in Texas. A digital specialist explained that the false email had been registered through an account connected to one of Mark's shell companies. The title company representative confirmed that their policy had relied on that approval. Vanessa's lawyer called it an administrative misunderstanding. Daniel answered by displaying Harold's inspection photographs. Marker M17 appeared on the screen, clean and visible before construction began. In the next image, Vanessa stood 3 feet away from it. Then the courtroom watched the video of workers removing the markers and placing them near the landscaping pond while her Range Rover waited beside the site. The custom plate was sharp enough to read, Silver Pines 15. Vanessa shifted in her chair. Daniel moved to the well records. The pump, the permits, and the original service account all carried the Mercer name. Monthly usage reports showed the development had drawn water without a transfer agreement. The final document was Vanessa's confidential email describing me as unstable and instructing residents not to examine their own deeds. The judge read it in silence. Mark's attorney requested a recess. The request was denied. When Mark was asked whether Vanessa knew the title had not been cleared, he paused long enough for everyone to understand the answer before he gave it. He said yes. The ruling came just after noon. The court confirmed my ownership of the full 62 acres. The development transfer was declared invalid. The title correction was permanently stopped. The judge ordered Dalton Ridge to surrender all records and froze the company's remaining proceeds from the home sales. The fraud investigation would continue separately. Vanessa was removed from association control and prohibited from accessing its accounts. No one cheered. The silence was better. It was the sound of a lie running out of places to stand. Then the judge addressed the homeowners. Because they had purchased in good faith, the court approved the temporary occupancy plan Daniel and I had proposed. Their homes would remain protected while corrected agreements were prepared. Vanessa turned toward them as if she expected support. Claire looked past her. Outside the courtroom, county investigators asked Vanessa and Mark to accompany them for formal interviews. She walked by me without her umbrella, her heels tapping against the tile. Daniel gathered the keys from the table and placed them in my hands. 15 cold pieces of metal rested against my palm. Vanessa had spent a year pretending those keys proved she controlled the land. The judge had just confirmed they opened buildings that now stood on mine. 3 weeks later, the stone sign at the entrance came down. The crew lifted each letter carefully, and the smell of cut mortar drifted across the road. In its place, I installed a simple cedar sign with black lettering, Mercer Land. Silver Pines Lease Community. No slogan, no gold trim, just the truth. The 14 families signed 30-year ground leases with fixed rates lower than what Vanessa had charged in association fees. Their mortgage companies accepted corrected title agreements, and the insurance carriers covered the legal costs caused by the false filings. Nobody lost a home. Nobody had to pack a truck. Claire became the first elected chair of the new resident council, which had 1 page of rules instead of 87. Maintain the shared road. Protect the well. Respect property lines. That was enough. The clubhouse became the 15th lease. I did not keep it as a private office. I converted half of it into a legal resource center for deployed service members facing property disputes. The other half stayed open for neighborhood meetings, birthday parties, and school fundraisers. We named it the Samuel Mercer Center after my grandfather. His photograph hung near the entrance beside the original 1968 survey. The first monthly rent deposits arrived on a Friday morning. 14 electronic payments appeared in the land account, followed by the clubhouse lease. I sat at my grandfather's old workbench, which Daniel had helped me recover from a storage warehouse owned by Dalton Ridge. The wood still carried dark oil stains from decades of repairs. I ran my thumb across one of them while the bank notifications chimed. Vanessa had intended those houses to erase my family from the land. Instead, each payment carried the Mercer parcel number. Mark Dalton accepted a plea agreement on financial fraud charges and surrendered the remaining development profits. Vanessa lost her real estate license and was ordered to repay association funds she had redirected through consulting contracts. Her Range Rover appeared at a county auction 2 months later. The custom plate did not sell with it. Officer Ruiz had returned it to me after the evidence hold ended. I mounted it inside the resource center beneath a small brass plaque that read, "Boundaries Matter." The boy who had carried my grandfather's horseshoe came by with his mother one Saturday afternoon. His name was Owen. He apologized for taking it, even though he had only found it in the flower bed. I told him he had done me a favor. We cleaned the rust together and hung it above the new cedar gate. When the wind moved through the oak trees, it tapped softly against the wood, the same sound I remembered from childhood. The well pump still hummed beneath the clubhouse, but now the meter was legal, the account was mine, and every family paid only for what they used. On my first quiet evening back, I stood near marker M17 and watched porch lights come on across the 15 homes. Children rode bicycles along the road. Someone grilled burgers near the clubhouse. Claire waved from her driveway. I could have demanded demolition. I could have treated every roof as evidence and every family as collateral damage. Vanessa expected that because it was the kind of choice she would have made. I chose something better. I kept the land. The families kept their homes. The community kept its future. And once a month, 15 payments arrived as a reminder that justice does not always need to tear something down. Sometimes it simply corrects the name on the deed, fixes the line on the map, and lets the truth collect rent.